I would now recognize the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Brooks.
Good morning, Secretary Clinton.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today. In drawing on what you just said, that very few, but no requests for Benghazi came to your attention, I'd like to show you something. This pile represents the emails that you sent or received about Libya in 2011, from February through December of 2011. This pile represents the emails you sent or received from early 2012 until the day of the attack. There are 795 emails in this pile. We've counted them. There are 67 emails in this pile in 2012. And I'm troubled by what I see here. And so my questions relate to these piles. In this pile in 2011, I see daily updates, sometimes hourly updates, from your staff about Benghazi and Chris Stevens. When I look at this pile, in 2012, I only see a handful of emails to you from your senior staff about Benghazi, and I have several questions for you about this disparity, because we know from talking to your senior advisors that they knew, and many of them are here today, seated behind you, they knew to send you important information, issues that were of importance to you, and I can only conclude by your own records that there was a lack of interest in Libya in 2012. So let's first focus, though, on this pile and what was happening in Libya in 2011. We had an ambassador to Libya, Ambassador Kretz, but you've told us that, and you told us in your opening, you handpicked Chris Stevens to be your special representative in Benghazi, and you sent him there. And by your own emails, most have provided last February, a few provided just a few weeks ago, they show that in March of 11, so we're in March of 11, you had Chris Stevens join you in Paris, where you were meeting with the leader of the Libyan revolution. And after Paris, that is when, as you talked about, Chris Stevens went into Benghazi, I believe in April 5th of 2011, on that Greek cargo ship. How long was he expected to stay? What were Chris Stevens' orders from you about Libya and about Benghazi specifically?
Chris Stevens was asked to go to Benghazi to do reconnaissance, to try to figure out who were the leaders of the insurgency who were based in Benghazi, what their goals were, what they understood would happen if they were successful. It was, as I said, the hard-nosed 21st century diplomacy that is rooted in the old-fashioned necessary work of building relationships and gathering information.
How long was he anticipated to stay in Benghazi? Do you recall?
It was open-ended. We were, in discussing it with him, unsure as to how productive it would be, whether it would be appropriate for him to stay for a long time or a short time. That was very much going to depend upon Chris's own assessment. We knew we were sending someone who understood the area, who understood the language, who understood a lot of the personalities because of the historical study that he used to love to do, and we were going to be guided by what he decided.
I'd like to draw your attention to an email. It's an email found at tab 1. It's an Ops Center email that was forwarded to you from Huma Abedin on Sunday, March 27th, that says at the bottom of the email, so the current game plan is for Mr. Stevens to move no later Wednesday from Malta to Benghazi, but the bottom of the email says the goal of this one-day trip is for him to lay the groundwork for a stay of up to 30 days. So just to refresh that recollection, I believe initially the goal was to go in for 30 days. Were you personally briefed on his security plan prior to him going into Libya? Because yes, at that time, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry to interrupt, Gaddafi's forces were still battling the rebels, correct?
Right. That's right.
And so were you personally briefed before you sent Mr. Stevens into Benghazi?
I was personally told by the officials who were in the State Department who were immediately above Chris, who were making the plans for him to go in, that it was going to be expeditionary diplomacy. It was going to require him to make a lot of judgments on the ground about what he could accomplish, and including where it would be safe for him to be and how long for him to stay. And I think the initial decision was, up to 30 days and reassess, but it could have been 10 days, it could have been 60 days, depending upon what he found and what he reported back to us.
And possibly what was determined about the danger of Benghazi. Who were those officials?
Well, there were a number of officials who were working.
That were advising you on the security specifically.
Well, with respect to the security, this was a particular concern of the Assistant Secretary for the Bureau in which Chris worked.
And I'm sorry, what was that person's name?
Assistant Secretary Jeff Feldman.
Thank you.
And it was also a concern of the Assistant Secretary for Diplomatic Security, as well as other officials within the State Department. And I think it's fair to say, Congresswoman, this was, we all knew, a risky undertaking. And it was something that was, as I said in my opening statement, more reminiscent of the way diplomacy was practiced back in the 19th century, because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have instantaneous communications. You would send diplomats and envoys into places and not hear from them for maybe months. This was obviously not of that kind, but it was not that different in degree from what we had done before, and it was a risky undertaking, and one which Chris volunteered for and was anxious to undertake.
And it was so risky, I'd like to pull up another email from the Ops Center that was forwarded to you from Ms. Abedin on Sunday, April 10th. So he had been there about 5 days, and it indicates that the situation in Ajdabiya had worsened to the point where Stevens is considering departing from Benghazi. This is within 5 days of him going in. Were you aware of that concern within the first 5 days that he had gone in?
Yeah.
And did anyone share that with you? And
Yes.
who did share that with you?
We were aware because we were really counting on Chris to guide us and give us the information from the ground. We had no other sources. There was no American outpost. There was no, American military presence. Eventually, other Americans representing different agencies were able to get into Benghazi and begin to do the same work, but they, of course, couldn't do that work overtly, which is why we wanted a diplomat who could be publicly meeting with people to try to get the best assessment. But it was always going to be a constant risk, and we knew that.
And so let me go back to the risk in 2011, because there was a lot of communication, once again, from your senior staff, from the State Department, to you or from you in 2011. And in fact, that is when Gaddafi fell. He fell in 2011. But then, when we go to 2012, Libya, Benghazi, Chris Stevens, the staff there, they seem to fall off your radar in 2012, and the situation's getting much worse in 2012. It was getting much worse. And let me just share for you, in your records that we have reviewed, there is not one email to you or from you in 2012 when an explosive device went off at our compound in April. There's not a single email in your records about that explosive device. So my question is, this was a very important mission in 2011. You sent Chris Stevens there, but yet when our compound is attacked in 2012, what kind of culture was created in the State Department that your folks couldn't tell you in an email about a bomb in April of 2012?
Well, Congresswoman, I did not conduct most of the business that I did on behalf of our country on email. I conducted it in meetings. I read massive amounts of memos, a great deal of classified information. I made a lot of secure phone calls. I was in and out of the White House all the time. There were a lot of things that happened that I was aware of and that I was reacting to. If you were to be in my office in the State Department, I didn't have a computer. I did not do the vast majority of my work on email, and I bet there's a lot of Sid Blumenthal's emails in there from 2011 too.
Well, we'll get
And
to
so
that
I think
later.
that there were, I don't want you to have a mistaken impression about what I did and how I did it. Most of my work was not done on emails with my closest aides, with officials in the State Department, officials in the rest of the government, as well as the White House and people around the world.
And thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure that it's not all done on emails, Madam Secretary, and there are meetings and there are discussions. And so then when our compound took a second attack on June 6th, when a bomb blew a wall through the compound then, no emails at all. But I am interested in knowing, who were you meeting with, who were you huddling with, how were you informed about those things, because there is nothing in the emails that talks about 2 significant attacks on our compounds in 2012. There was a lot of information in 2011 about issues and security posture, and yet nothing in 2012.
Well, I'd be happy to explain. Every morning when I arrived at the State Department, usually between 8 and 8:30, I had a personal one-on-one briefing from the representative of the Central Intelligence Agency, who shared with me the highest level of classified information that I was to be aware of on a daily basis. I then had a meeting with the top officials of the State Department every day that I was in town. That's where a lot of information, including threats and attacks on our facilities, was shared. I also had a weekly meeting every Monday with all of the officials, the assistant secretaries and others, so that I could be brought up to date on any issue that they were concerned about. During the day, I received hundreds of pages of memos, many of them classified, some of them so top secret that they were brought into my office in a locked briefcase that I had to read and immediately return to the courier. And I was constantly at the White House in the Situation Room, meeting with the National Security Advisor and others. I would also be meeting with officials in the State Department, foreign officials, and others. So there was a lot going on during every day. I did not email during the day, and except on rare occasions when I was able to, but I didn't conduct the business that I did primarily on email. That is not how I gathered information, assessed information, asked the hard questions of the people that I worked with.
It appears that leaving Benghazi, with respect to all of that danger, leaving Benghazi was not an option in 2012, and I yield back.
Well, if I could just quickly respond, there was never a recommendation from any intelligence official in our government, from any official in the State Department, or from any other person with knowledge of our presence in Benghazi to shut down Benghazi, even after the 2 attacks that the compound suffered. And perhaps, you would wonder why, but I can tell you that it was thought that the mission in Benghazi, in conjunction with the CIA mission, was vital to our national interests.